From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Welcome, good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Aaliyah Andres, and here are the news headlines to 12 o'clock. BC Premier David Eby spoke this morning about how the government will ensure new arrivals to British Columbia can apply their training abilities as soon as possible. Our reporter, Filip Kovacevic, has more details.
Premier David Eby announced a new legislation to help internationally trained professionals get jobs in their field of expertise. The International Credentials Recognition Act is said to address problems such as retesting an international professional's English comprehension and needing Canadian work experience. The new legislation will have 18 regulators overseeing 29 professions that include paramedics, veterinarians, early childhood educators, and lawyers, will be required to streamline their processes for internationally trained applicants. The bill is being read in BC legislature this week. Filip Kovacevic, 1680 The Crow.
Along with David Eby's announcement, we have several other stories being covered in-house today. We'll pass it over to our producer, Melanie Levesque.
As you just heard, Philip is covering the press conference with David Eby today. We are also covering several other stories, including the second ever Sex Workers Conference in BC, religious diversity in schools, and the appeal behind haunted houses. Back to you, Aaliyah.
All right. Thank you very much, Melanie. Changing over to the east from the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, airstrikes across Gaza have increased, and hospitals are scrounging for generator fuel. The Canadian Press's Don Kelly outlines the latest on the war.
The death toll from Israeli airstrikes is rising fast in Gaza, where a nearly 2-week power blackout has left hospitals scrounging for generator fuel in order to keep life-saving medical equipment and incubators operational. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed, mostly civilians who died during the initial Hamas attack on October 7th. The Hamas-run health ministry reports more than 5,000 Palestinians have died. From the Canadian Press, I'm Don Kelly.
Moving locally now, about 200 students begin their first day at a temporary replacement school after Port Coquitlam's Hazel Trembeth Elementary burnt down last week. The Winslow Center in Coquitlam has arranged a school bus for student pickup and places to hold makeshift classrooms. A fundraiser that has reached in the tens of thousands of dollars will provide each student a new supply kit, fit with pencils, markers, and other school supplies to be replaced what was lost in the fire. The cause of the suspicious fire is still under investigation, but thankfully the school was unoccupied and no one was hurt. Organized tenants in Vancouver will be rallying to protest poor living conditions tomorrow. On September 11th, 2023, tenants had delivered a letter to the Cressy Development Group signed by nearly 100 units demanding immediate action on issues including building neglect, safety and fire risks, and pests and mold. Cressy has not responded to the tenants' demands. The rally is set to take place in front of the Development Group's office on West 8th Avenue in Vancouver. And over the weekend, a new rainbow crosswalk in Fort Langley was heavily vandalized with tire marks. Residents say they could see smoke rising over buildings while the white pickup truck burned rubber over the crosswalk on Glover Road. Mounties have obtained footage of the incident and report that 2 white males were inside the truck during the incident. According to the Langley RCMP, this is the second time this month the crosswalk has been vandalized. Rapper Lil Yachty's show was stopped Saturday night at UBC after only a handful of songs only after a handful of songs when the rapper encouraged fans to rush onto stage. The University of British Columbia said arena staff decided to cancel the show because the floor was over capacity.
I know. They said we're going to have to go back to the seat, so we're going to have to cancel the show.
And after fans did not clear the pit area, the concert was brought to an end. There have been no reports of medical or police incidents. Yachty took to Instagram after the concert, writing, "They shut us down last night, Vancouver." The Ontario government is reversing its controversial expansions it made to the urban boundaries of some municipalities in order to build more homes. Housing Minister Paul Calandra said he would soon introduce legislations that will diminish changes to official plans. Calandra also noting that the previous housing minister's office was too involved in changing the official plans across the province.
The process was one that I was just not comfortable with. I think there was just a little bit too much involvement from individuals within the previous minister's office on the official plans in these areas.
Calandra replaced former Minister Steve Clark after resigning in the wake of two legislative watchdogs probes on the decision to remove land from the protected Greenbelt. At least 15 have been killed and many more injured when two trains collided in Bangladesh. Train service to other parts of the country have been suspended following the incident. It is still unknown what caused the trains to crash. The world's oldest dog, Bobby, has died at 31 years old at his home in Portugal. Bobby's veterinarian attributed his lifespan to good nutrition, constant contact with nature, freedom to discover his environment, and consistent love and care. The Guinness Book of World Records crowning the pup the oldest dog to ever live in February, also noting over 100 guests at his 31st birthday party with a collection of fish and meats. The varsity and junior varsity football teams in Lahaina played their first home games this past weekend since the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century destroyed the town. Classes resumed last week at Lahaina Luna High and at two other public schools that survived the August 8th fire. And on Saturday night, both Lahaina Luna's varsity and junior varsity football teams won their games. The return of football, which viewers said helped give the community a glimmer of hope amid the tragedy. Moving into some more sports, for tonight's Monday Night Football, the San Francisco 49ers take on the Minnesota Vikings. The 49ers remain on the road after a loss to the Cleveland Browns on Saturday, 1917. It was the first regular season loss that the team has suffered since the 2022 season. Afghanistan and Pakistan played in the Cricket World Cup, with Afghanistan beating Pakistan by 8 wickets today. The International Cup is also known as the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup. The tournament is one of the most viewed sporting events. Also coming up in the Cup, South Africa and Bangladesh face off at 1:30 Pacific time, and Australia takes on the Netherlands on Wednesday. And into weather, we are looking at the colder side of things. Winter tires are now required for drivers making their way through mountain highways, and just in time for the first snowfall of the season. Environment Canada has issued a special weather statement reporting a slow-moving Arctic front will debut into the Columbia and Kootenay region. The statement notes about 5 to 10 centimeters of snow could drop down onto the Trans-Canada Highway, with this weather system beginning today and continue into tomorrow afternoon across the region. And for your weather right now in Vancouver, it is currently 9 degrees when mostly cloudy, with humidity sitting at around 84%. Today we will get a high of 11 with bits of sunshine, with a 30% chance of showers in eastern sections of the region this afternoon. Into the rest of the week, we'll be looking at a mix of sun and cloud with a possible sunny autumn weekend. And that was your news headlines to 12 o'clock. I'm Aaliyah Andres, and thank you for tuning in to 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
On Wednesday, October 18th, environmental groups challenged the federal environment minister in court after he waited 8 months to issue protections to BC's endangered northern spotted owl.
Now, if you're already a little lost, you're not the only one. Today, we're going to discuss why this happened and what it means for our province's endangered species moving forward.
Welcome to Into the Wild. I'm your co-host, Jocelyn Chappelle.
And I'm your other co-host, Sonia Kutenbrauer. There's a lot to talk about here, so let's dive right in. Starting with the root of the issue, the northern spotted owl is facing near extinction.
That's right. Since 1995, the spotted owl population has seen huge decreases, anywhere from 50 to 75%. But in BC, we're closer to extinction than is comfortable to admit. As of right now, only one wild-born spotted owl is believed to live in our forests.
And these owls aren't just any old bird either. Spotted owls serve a necessary role in managing small rodent populations in our forests, and because they require a biodiverse habitat, they also serve as indication of a healthy forest.
The owls are also incredibly valued by the Spuzum Nation, whose land was home to dozens of these birds not too long ago, including the current sole surviving wild-born owl. The spotted owl holds deep spiritual value and is regarded as the messenger between this world and the spirit world.
Now, this threat of extinction is obviously not something that came out of nowhere. In fact, the spotted owl has been listed federally as endangered since 1986. The province even established a breeding program back in 2007 to prevent the owl's extinction. So, what gives? Why are populations still dwindling?
I can't say there's a single concrete answer to that, but if we look at the whole picture, the problem lies in the logging of old-growth forests, more specifically in the Fraser Canyon, where the owls would typically be found.
We've gone from whole clusters of intact valleys now to just remnant stands remaining, and that is what has caused the steep decline in spotted owl numbers.
Joe Foy is just one of many individuals working to prevent the owl's extinction. A protected areas campaigner for the Wilderness Committee, Joe spent this past summer in the Fraser Canyon to experience firsthand why the spotted owls are going extinct.
And I had gotten maps, our organization had gotten maps, where BC had issued logging permits. So we were able to overlap those recently issued logging permits with federally mapped critical habitat. And so I spent the summer photographing active logging operations in old forests mapped by the federal government as critical habitat.
Environmental groups have been criticizing the lack of consistency when it comes to what each government aims to prioritize. On one hand, we've got the federal government, who has mapped out protected areas in order for the owls to have a chance at recovery. And on the other, we've got the provincial government, who has approved logging in these same areas. Okay, now that we know a bit about one of the major reasons the spotted owl is going extinct, let's dive into what is being done to stop this from happening, and how all that led to a judicial review of the Environment Minister on Wednesday.
There is a ton of background and history to the legal proceedings of this situation, but for the sake of simplicity, let's start with the petition submitted back in October of 2022.
This petition was written up by the Wilderness Committee and their legal representation, EcoJustice, and sent off to the Federal Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault. The overall goal of this petition was to get an emergency order issued.
Unless you're a legal policy fanatic, you probably have no idea what an emergency order is, so here's a quick rundown. An emergency order is a general term and refers to ordering a province to adhere to a certain law or act on an immediate basis. Typically, it's used when the federal government finds risk to human or animal life, and it overrides the authority of a province in order to prevent that risk.
In this scenario, an emergency order would be issued under Canada's Species at Risk Act, otherwise known as SARA. This would have stopped the province from allowing 2,500 hectares of necessary habitat from being logged.
But for an emergency order to be issued, i.e. acted on, it requires a bit of a process, is that right?
That's exactly right. It's not as simple as it may seem, and also not as effective as one may think. for an emergency order to be issued, it first needs to be recommended to the Cabinet, who then have the right to approve it or not.
Let's jump to February of 2023. At this time, Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault confirms he has indeed received the petition and has determined that, yes, ongoing logging in the area is putting the survival of the spotted owl at risk.
This is an opinion he forms based on the petitioner's evidence. He then publicly communicated that opinion back to the Wilderness Committee and stated he intends on recommending an emergency order to the Cabinet.
Now, as silly as that may seem to have to reiterate, it's actually one of the most important pieces to this story and in this case.
Under the Species at Risk Act, Guilbeault has the obligation to make a recommendation for an emergency order if he believes there is a threat to the survival of the species.
Which, I mean, makes sense. If it's an emergency, why wouldn't you act urgently? No point in issuing an emergency order if it isn't urgent, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And not only does he not immediately make the recommendation in February, he doesn't make it in March, or in April, or in May, or June.
And this goes on for several months, but let's pause in June for a second, because that's when things really start ramping up. Jocelyn, what happens come June?
Well, at that point, the Wilderness Committee and Eco-Justice are not pleased with the lack of timely action and decide to follow through with filing a judicial review against the Environment Minister.
So now we know that was about an 8-month delay from coming to this opinion that there was logging that was going to happen this year in 2023 that was going to threaten the recovery of the species, to making the recommendation at the end of September, asking the court to determine whether that delay is something that is reasonable and allowed under the Species at Risk Act.
That was Andra Azevedo, one of the lawyers for Eco-Justice representing the Wilderness Committee in this case.
By filing this, the aim was to, as Andra says, determine whether or not Guilbeault was allowed to wait so long, but also to speed up the process of this order being recommended, which would hopefully help Cabinet to recognize the urgency in saving the spotted owl.
Before we jump to September, as she mentioned, let's first look at July. Jocelyn, what happened in July?
Well, the knowledge of the Environment Minister's plans were obviously not a secret, right? This was public knowledge at this point. The thing with actually issuing an emergency order is it takes away the authority of the provincial government, which obviously provincial officials are not the biggest fan of.
Another factor is how this emergency order would impact other elements of the equation, such as the logging industry. Our province relies on the economic boost from logging, so I think it's fair to say the province would do nearly everything to avoid having the emergency order issued.
And that's kind of what happened. I mean, I wouldn't say they did everything in their power to stop it because that would be a bit excessive, but by July, the provincial government was said to be lobbying to discourage the federal cabinet from approving the order.
Now, bear in mind, Minister Guilbeault hasn't even made the recommendation for the emergency order. Roughly 5 months have gone by at this point, and it's given the provincial government enough time to prepare.
And skipping to September, it seems the province was successful in that. On September 26th, Minister Guilbeault finally makes the recommendation, and by October 5th, it's rejected by the federal cabinet.
And you're probably thinking, well, that's the end of that, right? The recommendation was made and they said no. What more is the judicial review going to accomplish?
So before we get into the details of the judicial review, let's look at why our Federal Species at Risk Act is deemed so controversial.
I mean, we could really go on about this topic if we wanted to, but instead, let's hear from the experts.
The way our law is written is that the federal minister takes a recommendation for an emergency order to cabinet, and cabinet can say no. Groups, citizens, individuals, or organized groups make all this effort within a law that can be turned off without any explanation.
I think the problem is that the way the Species at Risk Act has been set up is, or at least how the federal government has applied the Species at Risk Act, is that it's allowed them to just wait rather than taking more proactive approaches to actually, for Environment Canada, let's say, to go out and actually look and try and assess whether there's imminent threats without necessarily needing to receive these kind of urgent letters from members of the public.
Sonia, let's summarize what we've learned so far.
Okay.
BC's northern spotted owl is endangered. Only one wild owl remains.
Right. And so Eco-Justice and the Wilderness Committee go to the Environment Minister and say, hey, we gotta permanently prevent any logging from going through here, because if not, the species is gonna die off.
The environment minister agrees. He's like, yeah, no, you're right. I'm going to recommend an emergency order. And then he waits 8 months to do so. Eco-Justice and the committee are like, hold on, you can't just wait several months. We're filing a judicial review to speed things up.
And then by the time the recommendation comes through, the province has gathered their resources and lobbied to the cabinet. Whether or not that had any deciding factor, the federal cabinet then rejects the order.
So why go through a judicial review?
So that's pretty typical of how these emergency orders have happened. Like, even just to get to an emergency order recommendation often involves some kind of legal action. And then, yes, in the few cases that there's been actual orders made, it's also been often always the result of cases that have kind of led to that.
Historically, as Andrew says, fighting this process in court is the most effective way of getting adequate protections. Having an emergency order even recommended, let alone issued under SARA, is nearly unheard of.
In the 20 years of SARA's existence, the only 2 emergency orders issued, one for the western chorus frog and one for the sage grouse, both involved a judicial review to get the ball rolling.
Which is where we are now. We can't say for sure how this will play out, but in the meantime, the Wilderness Committee and Eco-Justice plan to continue fighting to save the habitat and the existence of the northern spotted owl.
We reached out to Environment and Climate Change Canada, who in a written statement says the federal government acknowledges the concerns and is working closely with its partners to ensure that a suite of measures to support spotted owl recovery are implemented.
They also stated the minister fulfilled his obligations under SARA and that they will not be issuing an emergency order at this time.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Into the Wild, and be sure to join us next time. I'm Jocelyn Chappelle.
And I'm Sonia Kutenbauer. Thank you for listening.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to 1680 The Crow. I'm Liam Higgs, and I will be bringing you your 12:30 news update. Let's get right into it with an update on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Another small aid convoy has been allowed into Gaza as fears of widening war grows. ABC reporter Daria Albinger has more.
The U.S. is ramping up its military presence in the Middle East after a U.S. destroyer shot down several missiles and drones last week. The Pentagon says they were fired from Yemen, potentially toward Israel. ABC's Louis Martinez says these additional assets are to prevent other terrorist groups from entering the Israel-Hamas war.
Well, we heard from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin talking about how the purpose of sending these ships and additional forces to the Middle East was to defend American forces as well as to protect American interests. So by sending these ships, it was the message of deterrence. And again, the same message to Iran and to Hezbollah: don't get involved.
The violence is surging in the occupied West Bank. This Palestinian activist says it includes attacks on Palestinians by Israeli settlers.
Burning Palestinian properties, killing Palestinians, injuring Palestinians, calling for the killing of Palestinians.
With continuing coverage, Israel-Hamas war. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
On to the rest of the world now. At least 15 have been killed and many more injured when two trains collided in Bangladesh. Train services to other parts of the country have been suspended following the accident. It is still unknown what caused the trains to crash. In other international news, the U.S. is once again warning that it would defend the Philippines in case of an armed attack. After Chinese ships blocked and collided with two Filipino vessels, Julia Walker from the Associated Press explains.
Philippine diplomats summoned a Chinese embassy official in Manila on Monday for a strongly worded protest following Sunday's collisions off Second Thomas Shoal, which is also claimed by China. No injuries were reported, but the Philippine ships reported damage. China has blamed the Philippines for the collisions, saying the vessels were carrying construction materials to strengthen the Philippine outpost at the shoal. The Philippines and other neighbors of China have resisted Beijing's sweeping territorial claims over virtually the entire South China Sea. I'm Julie Walker.
Going back to Canada now, the Crown has dropped a bail violation charge against the organizer of the Freedom Convoy, Tamara Leach, in order to free up court time for her main criminal trial, which is running longer than expected. That trial slowed down because Leach and her co-accused demanded information about a software update that wiped the data off of the phones of at least 2 police officers after the protest. Polls have been finding a rising number of Canadians are struggling with their monthly mortgage payments. Let's hear from Don Kelly, a Canadian Press reporter.
15% of mortgage holders surveyed say their mortgage payments are very difficult. That's up from 8% in March and 11% in June. Despite signs the Bank of Canada is going to hold its key interest rate steady at 5% on Wednesday, 79% of respondents are worried or very worried they'll face higher payments when it comes time to renew their mortgage. Those with variable rate mortgages are less likely than those with fixed rate mortgages to find their monthly payments easy to handle at the moment. Don Kelly, The Canadian Press, Toronto.
Zooming in now, an update now on the Hazel Trembath situation. Students from Hazel Trembath Elementary School have now stepped foot in a new temporary school at Winslow Centre this morning. That fire that displaced these students is still under investigation and is believed to be suspicious. Michael Thomas, board chair for School District 43, has said that there wasn't too much left to recover after the fire. A fundraiser for the school, however, has been started. That fundraiser has reached a goal of $30,000 so far. The fundraiser was set up for new school supplies for this upcoming year. Police are still asking for anyone who may have information or video surveillance of the area to contact their investigators. In other local news, rapper Lil Yachty's show was stopped Saturday night after only a handful of songs when the rapper encouraged fans to rush the stage. The University of British Columbia said arena staff decided to cancel the show because the floor area was over capacity. There have been no reports of medical or police incidents. Moving on to weather now, some places in BC are expected to see the first snowfall of the season this morning. Environment and Climate Change Canada says the estimated snowfall ranges between 10 and 15 centimeters. Thanks for joining me. I'm
Stay
Liam
tuned
Higgs,
for
and
more
that was
on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Microlink, connecting you with your BCIT community.
Hello everybody, my name is Tatiana Yakovleva and welcome to the first episode of Microlink for the fall term. I'm excited to be back. This episode has a lot in store for us. But first, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which BCIT's main campuses are located is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the shared traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish First Nations. To start us off, I sat down with Celine Loriot, the president of the Student Association, to talk about the new executive board, what their visions are, and what's next for us. Celine, why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Celine. I am the president of the BCIT SA and a nursing student at BCIT.
That's awesome. And with so many BCIT students, it's never just being a student. Everyone does so much, right?
Of course. I feel like there's a bit of something for everyone at BCIT.
Right. So let's start with a few students. Can you tell us something about the 2023-2024 executive team? What's the vibe? What's the energy? What are you guys bringing to the table?
So I feel so fortunate to be working with such an enthusiastic team. So please don't mind if I rave about some of them. Charlene, the chair of health sciences, is a fellow classmate and nursing student like me. She's an avid runner and hiker. Also, she is pursuing her neonatal specialty. Shelby, the VP Equity and Sustainability, is an accounting student and has an appreciation for Shrek. Feel like a lot of us do.
That's my girl.
And her cat named Kevin. Simran, the chair of Business and Media, is an international student who has a bachelor's in French from India. Also, she keeps students safe as a security guard at BCIT. Abdul is studying architecture and building technology. He likes sports and cars, but only the fast ones. Justin is the chair of computing and academic studies. He is in the computer systems technology program and the voice of Raisin Crane in the Strawberry Shortcake series and volunteers at RAPS Cat Sanctuary in Richmond once a week. Daniel, the chair of specialized transport, is studying aircraft maintenance engineering. He is also serving Canada in the armed forces.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, very dedicated. Lastly, Jimmy, the VP External, is an electrical engineer student and a Lego connoisseur. I could go on about Mia, Rishank, Josh, and Matthew. And if I did, we'd probably be here for a couple hours.
That's fair. We did hear from Mia and Vershank and a lot of the returning execs already. If you haven't checked out the previous interviews, I strongly recommend to doing so. Well, Celine, enough about your team. I want to hear about you. What do you bring to the executive team as the president?
As I mentioned, I am a nursing student in my final year, so I've really honed how to stay calm under pressure and how to think critically. Before this role, I served as the BCIT SA Chair of Health Sciences, and based on that, I know how it feels to be new at the SA. Therefore, I really try my best to set up my executives for success by regularly checking in, acting as a soundboard for new ideas, and encouraging self-care in work-life balance. I firmly believe that the president should share power, and leadership is best when it's collaborative. My priority is that students should feel seen, heard, and valued. It's not about being president that motivates me, it is serving the SA mandate of enhancing student life.
Can you briefly touch on what enhancing student life means to you?
So, enhancing student life is really listening to the students and delivering on what their current needs are. One of these mission projects that I'm working on is supporting students' mental health and awareness at BCIT. I plan on continuing with my Campus Convos events, which are mental health workshops with guest speakers shared over a meal at small round tables. This was actually a shared initiative with Josh Liu, the VP Student Experience that we started last year. So I'm definitely excited to continue with this initiative. Also, I want to boost student resilience and foster that sense of community by hosting more social events. I want to make BCIT more fun.
I personally root for paint night, so maybe you can make it happen one day.
For sure.
Okay, we got one vote in. Hopefully I'll get through. As a nursing student, what is the value of mental health? I'm sure you know that more than I do. So can you please briefly touch on that and the magnitude that it carries?
So I started my nursing studies in the peak of COVID.
Right.
And that was the strangest time of my life, right? Because instead of practicing in the community, we were practicing with simulation mannequins, right? So I think for me, mental health is so important because the pandemic made us more disconnected, right? And I think being a nursing student puts me in a unique position to really be in tune with what's going on around me in my environment and have a sense of what's going on for people and how I can really use my compassion to help others. Yeah, I think that's why mental health awareness, especially for students at BCIT, is so important to me.
Is that the main reason you got into nursing?
Yes, because I have had the privilege of growing up with lots of inspirational nurses, and I think just seeing the impact they had on their communities and, sure, no one is ever going to remember their names all the time, but people remember how they made them feel. And I think that is really what inspired me to get into nursing, because I want to have that kind of impact on someone. Make them know that I didn't give up, that, no matter what, I'm there for them.
I love the quote that it's more about how nurses make people feel, because in medical or mental health aspects, it's so vulnerable.
Yes.
And having a right attitude just makes the difference so much. But we'll stray away from that topic and we'll come back to the initiatives. Are there any other initiatives that your colleagues have been fostering that you're very excited about?
So I'm excited to work with Shelby Woida, the VP of Equity and Sustainability, to find ways to indigenize the organization. And we are thinking of doing this through consulting with elders on best practices so we can move more in the direction of promoting reconciliation that is meaningful to us. We hope to achieve this through education and events in collaboration with community partners at BCIT. Mia Boo, the VP of Finance and Administration, plans on continuing her free tax clinic for students. It was very popular and successful last year. I think this is an excellent initiative as tax time can be stressful for students, and it allows student volunteers to practice their tax skills. Vershank Prabhu, the chair of Energy, is leading the SETREP committee, which is focused on improving the SETREP program for everyone. And actually, many executives are interested in finding ways to just make it that better experience. And lastly, Justin Saint, the chair of Computing and Academic Studies, plans to continue hosting the annual QDS Hackathon, where teams work together to create solutions to an industry problem. And the winners get prizes and chances to connect with the judges who are potential employers.
Ooh,
Lots of fun stuff happening.
So you mentioned the tax clinic, correct? And I personally can vouch that I volunteered for it last year. Honestly, an amazing experience for those who go there and volunteer there as well. But speaking of taxes and the economy, as you know, that the current economy is not very favorable with the interest rates rising, and it has affected everyone. Currently, there was a referendum last year regarding finances. So how does BCIT Student Association operate in a deficit? And how do you choose your priorities when it comes to limited funds? Because everything has a limited fund. We cannot...
Of course.
Unfortunately, we would love to have unlimited funds, but that's not realistic. So how do you set your priorities in this situation?
It's true that we are in a deficit, and we have chosen not to cut back services to students. Hosting successful events requires thoughtful planning and buy-in from the team. Also, we have options to move funds around to support initiatives. For example, September is jam-packed with student-facing events that we started planning many months in advance. The execs will be present at the events, so please stop by and hang out with us. It'll be great.
Awesome. Well, can you give us a sneak peek of one of those events?
Oh, one of them, we plan on having a pub party where we'll have a DJ and we'll have meal specials. And yeah, I'm really excited just thinking about it.
And besides the social events and gatherings, what do you think that the students at BCIT need the most in this current time?
It isn't easy being a student. Affordability is huge, and we know students need to feel supported during their academic journey, and there are numerous negative impacts from the rising cost of parking, housing, food, education, and textbooks. The list goes on. I see it every day with my classmates, many of whom have to work longer hours or take additional jobs just to make ends meet.
Right.
Additionally, mental health challenges continue to be prevalent, and no student should have to face this alone without adequate support. The SA is here to help, and will keep pushing BCIT and the government to step up even more.
And what does stepping up mean for you in this case?
So stepping up means really addressing these needs and being there for students. We opened a food pantry and we secured student support as a BCIT SA community for increased investments in this program over the coming year. Most importantly, we are constantly advocating to BCIT and the government around parking affordability, student aid, better regulation of international tuition, and increased mental health support.
And as far as I understand, that's the responsibility of VP External to lobby for those things.
Correct.
I know that's not your role, but can you briefly give us a sentence or two to summarize what your colleague does?
So Jimmy, the VP External, he goes on lobby trips with the government relations strategist Stuart. And in those trips, they are purposeful trips where they advocate for students in meetings with government officials.
I'm sure it's very tiring to do so, but I appreciate Jimmy doing that on our behalf. We'll get to the nitty-gritty part. I've heard some rumors that some students feel there is a disconnect between the student association and the students themselves. Do you think that is the case?
We can always do better. And this is top of mind during my presidency. Students connect with us for appointments with advocacy specialists for support with wellness and navigating BCIT educational policies. Also, students enjoy connecting with career specialists as they help give them that extra boost that they need in their careers and connect them with employers at career fairs. We form a council with student representatives across all schools and campuses. Therefore, I strive to find ways to motivate students to join, especially where students can directly have their say and shape the direction of the SA. BCIT attends student consultations with us throughout the year, so this is a great way to let them know what challenges and suggestions you have.
And for want students to get involved and to really voice their opinions, how can they do that? I believe, as far as I know, anyone can sit on the council meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct. Everyone is welcome. We have food. And yeah, it's one of the best ways to stay in the know in what's happening in the student community.
SA itself, there was a 5-year plan called Raising the Bar. What does that mean to you specifically, Celine?
Raising the bar means putting in the work to match words to action. For instance, we want to engage with more students by having more student-facing events throughout the year. Doing so will increase our presence at BCIT and student engagement at times such as the AGM and elections. Our new strategic plan will require everyone to work together in January to determine how we move forward into the future to enhance student life.
And what do you hope will be accomplished by 2024 with this plan?
I hope that students will be able to see our presence and feel that we are here to support them.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the BCIT students listening today?
At the BCIT SA, you choose how you want to be involved. You can join one of our 40-plus clubs, attend Kickstart and Welcome Back events, sign up as a set rep or counselor, or go to our website to learn about all the great services we offer. Please reach out to us if you have questions or concerns and send us your ideas. We are an inclusive and welcoming organization, pet-friendly too.
That is true. I've seen so many cute doggies running around. But I personally lobby for more cats. I'm a cat person. We need more cats.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you can't tell them where to go, so that's probably the only hiccup. But to end things off on a maybe slightly lighter note, do you have any advice for upcoming students? A lot of people are starting in September. What do you think a new student at BCIT should know?
At BCIT, there are so many people that would like to help you and so many resources here. And no one is ever going to turn you away if you say you're not okay. And yeah, we are a supportive community and we really want to see our students thrive.
I think it takes effort to reach out, which is why there might be a sort of barrier when it comes to it. But I can say from personal experience, it is worth it. If there is anything, an issue going on, and even if it's not really related to student life, you can always find resources. I personally encourage every listener to really reach out to people. We're only an email away, really, so.
Yeah.
And you can book appointments with Celine and other executives as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So each executive holds their office hours, and one way to find out when we're available is to go on our website and click the link to book an appointment with us. Or even if you just see us in the hallway, talk to us. We're happy to chat.
So now you know how Celine sounds like. So if you hear her voice, you know who she is. That's what it's like, hi, Celine. But thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that the September will be off to a great start. It sounds like a lot of is cooking up, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, like I said, I want to make BCIT fun again.
To continue discussing changes at the Student Association, I sat down with Roland Gagel, the Director of Finance and Interim Executive Director for the SA. He and I discussed what his two current roles entail, how they play into one another, what their differences are, and what they do to make the student life better. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Roland. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Roland Gagel, and I am the Director of Finance and the Interim Executive Director for the Student Association of BCIT.
So, Director of Finance is your main role, correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell me more about your main role?
I've been with the Student Association since 2003, so 20 years now, and my role as the Director of Finance is to oversee the finance and accounting and administration of the Student Association.
And in terms of being Interim Executive Director, how does that look like for you?
I get a lot more emails on a daily basis now. So in terms of the role of the executive director, it's overseeing the operations of all of the staff and acting as a liaison, as a liaison to the board and council. So assisting and supporting them and translating their objectives down to the staff and trying to achieve the goals that they want to have.
And in that position, do you integrate with all of the levels of the Student Association, or is it more of a relay between the board and the employees of the Student Association?
There's obviously a team of people. I don't talk to everybody individually. In totality, the Student Association has about 100 staff, so I don't talk to everyone, and many of the staff are involved with serving the students at our retail stores and things.
Right.
But so I don't manage all the staff directly. There's a team of directors that I directly liaison with or chat with and inform them or inform them of the board's wishes and just manage the operations from that point.
And how long have you been in this interim role?
Since June.
Okay. And combining this and your main role of Director of Finance, what does your day in your life look like?
Answering a lot more emails than I need to be doing, and trying to fit in the Director of Finance duties, some of which I've downloaded a little bit to the controller of the Student Association. Everyone's pitching in as best they can to help me out. It's an awful lot, and I certainly don't mind doing it for the benefit of the Student Association. So I certainly can't do it by myself. All of the staff are helping me out as best they can.
And I did hear Little Bird say that you do bike to work.
Do bike to work most days.
Most days. That's a nice start to your routine. Is there anything else that you like in your daily routine to break up the busyness?
Well, I try to make sure I have lunch.
That's always good.
That's always good. Other than that, no, it's bike to work to sort of get some fresh air and get going, and then it's doing the work and trying to answer emails, try to reach out to staff, talk to staff directly. I try not to sit at my desk too much. I do like to chat with people because I find it's a more informative way to bring the team together and sort of move things forward. So yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like the students to know about you and the Student Association?
I've been with the Student Association for 20 years, as I said. I've seen a tremendous amount of growth in the Student Association since I started. It is a completely different organization since when I started in 2003, but the mission has always stayed the same. All of the staff are dedicated to tagline. It's not just a tagline, it's the mission of the Student Association, which is enhancing student life. I'm always striving to make the Student Association better, but always better in the sense of trying to make things better for students, because the students are the members of the Student Association.
And how does that betterment look like in the next 5 years for you?
Well, there's a number of projects on the table in the short term in improving the food pantry, food security program. We've recently hired a food security coordinator as per the referendum that was passed last spring by the students. So enhancing that program, part of the objectives of that program is to bring it to the other campuses where possible. How that is actually going to look is still to be determined, but we're working on that because we fully understand the need of food security exists at all campuses. We're still working on with BCIT to determine where additional space for the Student Association could be on campus. That is part of the mandate of the Student Association. And so that's still in the works. It's taking a little longer than we anticipated, just because of the complexity of the negotiations with BCIT and the need to find the space and then to pay for it. We are collecting a new building fee to facilitate the building of a new space or acquiring a new space, however that may be, and there's just a lot. It's a complex thing, so we're still working on that. And then just in general, just trying to strive that all of our services are a little bit better every year, and make the delivery of services to students more efficient, more effective, and of more value to students.
And you talked about the consequences of the referendum. Is there any other ripple effect that students may not notice in their daily life?
With respect to the food security program, we brought that forward. It was brought forward by council to the students, and they voted in a positive manner to increase the fee as it relates specifically to the food security program, and now we're just rolling that out. the ripple effect there is just to be of benefit to students because the students found that to be of value. I can't really think of any other ripple effects. It's just all in the package or mandate to enhance student life.
And I talked to Celine about involving more student events. Is that something you're currently working on, or is it something that you don't oversee as much?
I am certainly working on it, not directly, but the council and the board has communicated that wish to me to have more actual student life on campus in terms of events, and I've communicated that to the other staff, and we are working on that. So, for instance, we did have the party at the pub on September 22nd, which was quite successful, and we've heard from students that they enjoyed that very much, and that seemed to go well. And we're in the process of planning another party for Halloween, and probably another kind of a party at the end of November. And we intend to continue planning more events, both bigger events and smaller events, to provide more life on campus.
What was some of the feedback that you received from the students during the Habitat Pub party?
Generally positive. They all seem to have a good time. There was some pickup on the Uber rides that we provided to students for the night of the party. We intend to do that again. With respect to the Halloween party, it was generally well received, and everything went reasonably smoothly. There weren't really any major hiccups as far as I'm aware. So it was generally positive. We're just trying to, for the Halloween party, to expand it a little bit and make it an even bigger event. I'm not going to share any details because that's going to come out in the next week or two, the details as it relates to that. But we're just trying to make the next party bigger and better, more fun.
Will you dress up?
Will I dress up? I hadn't thought about that yet.
That's fair enough. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
I hope those 2 interviews were very insightful for you folks, because they were for me, and I work for the Student Association. Oh, but speaking of, you can check out more Student Association content, events, and things that are happening in the area on the Instagram at BCITSA. Same with Link. Our Instagram is at LinkBCIT. Also, check out our TikTok, run by yours truly. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and I will see you in the next one.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Siggy-Kane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Hello, my name is Grace McLeod, and this is For the Record on 1680 The Crow. The Vancouver Island marmot is a species that is on critical endangerment. However, a non-profit group called the Vancouver Island Marmot Recovery Foundation is on the task to repopulate these furry cat-sized creatures. I'm here today with Adam Taylor, the executive director of this non-profit organization.
We're the Marmot Recovery Foundation, and our mission is to try and recover the wild population of the Vancouver Island marmot. Vancouver Island marmot is the only endemic mammal species in British Columbia. It's a species that only occurs on Vancouver Island and nowhere else in the world. And unfortunately, it's also one of the most endangered mammals on the planet. So if we go back to our founding back in 1998, when we were created, there were fewer than 100 marmots left in the wild. And there was the belief that really quite dramatic efforts were needed to save this species. So initially, the thinking was that it was probably going to be difficult to impossible to stop the species from going completely extinct in the wild, and that we needed a captive breeding program and reintroduction program to save the species. So we started trying to learn how to breed marmots in captivity and care for them. By the time we were ready to release our first marmots in 2004, there were 23 marmots left in the wild. Marmots live in pretty inhospitable landscapes. So Vancouver Island marmots typically live above 1,000 meters in elevation in avalanche chutes and bowls that are talus fields, so covered in small rock. They're not easy places to access, and so we do sometimes miss marmots for sure. And that really has been the primary sort of cornerstone of our recovery effort for the past 20 years is working with the Calgary Zoo and Toronto Zoo to breed marmots in captivity and then take the young from those marmots and release them back to the wild. And by doing that, we've been able to grow the wild population from really just a tiny, like 4 colonies to a population that now has about 200, probably closer to 250 by the time we're done counting all of our marmots at the end of this year. It's been a pretty good year. I mean, we're really proud, of course, of the success that we've had, but I do need to emphasize just how far this species still has to go. You know, this is still one of the most endangered mammals on the planet. So, you know, you think about giant pandas, you know, there's a few thousand giant pandas, Siberian tigers, you know, there's hundreds, probably 400 to 600 Siberian tigers in the wild. Mountain gorilla is kind of 400 to 800. So this species really is kind of right at that top of that critically endangered species list at a global level.
Wow, it's really cool to see that you guys have kind of come as far as you've come. Can I ask what has happened to the population? If you know, like why are